Yeah, I'm so excited to read this. Alright, let's get started. Inside the abandoned built mansion, Craig survived the surroundings. He had placed Delphi on an old rugged couch near a window. Delphi was still incapacitated from what Craig had done to his asshole and could barely move or talk. Oh good. Alright. It seemed to Craig that several squatters had been here lately. Many abandoned supplies and other items usually used by squatters were scattered throughout the property. What was peculiar was that it seemed almost as if the items had been abandoned in a rush, but also if several different groups of squatters had moved in with their items, only to leave suddenly without bringing their things. Perhaps they had to leave in a hurry because they were chased away by someone or something. Wow. Okay. Craig sniffed around several of the rooms. The smell would have been intolerable for most people, but Craig had been through worse. The humans who were here before didn't bathe or flush or wash at all, typically squatters. Surprisingly enough, there was a strong smell of both dried blood and wet blood as well from several different people or creatures. This meant either people butchered animals there for food, which was very likely, or the mansion was a scene of one or more very bloody homicides. A thought scary enough to contemplate for almost anyone, but not Craig. Craig wasn't afraid of violence. He even enjoyed it as a sport or pastime, but he was always violent, especially during sex. He couldn't help it. It was something primal that existed inside him, his very soul. The apex of evolution. In this way of thinking, anyone who hung around these parts and was silly enough, violence would have been effective against Craig was in for quite a surprise. Back in the main hall, Craig approached Delphi, who was murmuring incomprehensibly. Yeah, dear, dear. Craig comforted him as he pat him on the head. Soon you'll recover and we can start again. Again? Delphi screamed out of his stupor. He couldn't think clearly, and despite being under the effect of the previous very intense welcome Craig had given him, the thought of going once more shocked yet amazed him. Still, he wasn't unsure if it would be pleasurable or he would simply pass out from some sort of sensory overload. Craig grabbed Delphi's body and turned it over, then began to pull his pants down along with his underwear. He proceeded to remove the entirety of his pants, underwear, shoes, and socks and just tossed them far away to the middle of the living room they were in. Don't try to get it back, you're barefoot. Don't try to get it back. You're barefoot and there's broken glass everywhere, Craig warned. Having his clothes removed and tossed away made Delphi get into the submissive mood. Oh god. How frightening to be exposed like that in this strange, creepy place. Oh god. Oh god. He just lay down on his side, silent, and waited for more input from Craig, who then grabbed his leg and pulled them together against Dolpho's daughter. In that fell position with his limb compressed, Delphi's anus began to ooze a thicky pasty mixture of sperm, feces, and blood, a disgustingly kinky concoction that resulted from Craig's primary intensity in their first round of greeting each other. Quite a lot came out, even more so when Craig pushed Delphi's legs harder into his torso. Craig cupped his hand and scooped a handful, then proceeded to smear it on Delphi's face. Delphi was surprised, disgusted, and felt the humiliation creeping back in, despite the fact that there was nobody there to say it beside the both of them. The entire vibe of being in this desolate mansion gave it a risky sensation that potentialized the sensuality. Delphi also felt somewhat disgusted by the faces in his face, while Craig seemed to be getting aroused by it. Craig manly hand pressed Delphi's face with his palm before his other hand reached out to Delphi's hair, grabbing it on top violently and hurtfully. He then used his palm hand to force Delphi's mouth open and then sat the ooze inside. Oh damn. Delphi's eyes began to lacrimate with indignity and helplessness. This was a new type of intensity that he was not familiar or comfortable with. Yet he felt so insecure and submissive to protest or resist. Witnessing Delphi's tears sparked something inside Craig, something dark and cruel, which ignited the spark of Craig's deep secret desires of the most gruesome nature. Where are we? Delphi asked with shitty and bloody sperm leaking out of his mouth, trying to move away from what was being done on him. Swallow, shouted. Oh, really? He would not tolerate disobedience. Wow. Delphi obeyed, now with tears flowing down his cheeks from both eyes. Oh, oh God. Uh, this is intense. Tears that would reach the bloody shitty sperm. Tears of faces was sickening. Despite being mixed with sperm, he tried to hold the ooze in his mouth for a while so as to not swallow it, but Craig's shout sparked a quick and tasteless swallow. Yes, I want you to know we both taste together. How we both taste together. Oh. Craig's voice was different now. It was ruthless, but in a bad way. Delphi went to the convention in hopes of seeing and being with Craig, but not just for the sex, but also for the connection and they had. This side of Craig and its nasty attitude was beginning to disappoint Delphi. Delphi mustered up all the courage he could find to can we just take a break? In tears, he still felt vulnerable from being in this creepy place, half naked and now with blood and shit on his face. The thought of being wanted by the police no longer aroused him. He now hoped that the police would find them both and rescue him from Craig. You would deny me the pleasure of enjoying the time we have together. The best way I see fit? Craig asked, pulling before Delphi's hair hard and slapping him even harder with his other hand. The impact of the hand on Delphi's cum-ridden face made a peculiar splatting noise. It hurt even more for Delphi, who completely broke down in tears. Okay, just please stop. Let's take a moment. I don't know where we are. What if someone walked in? Delphi cried out. Now wishing someone walked in or anything would happen to interrupt his gruesome interaction with Craig. The whole time he had said that, Craig was still holding and pulling his hair now closer to his crotch. You know what I want? I want you. There's no better movement to have. We and everyone else enjoyed that little show back in the convention center. But now is the main course, because I have you all to myself, Craig explained with viciousness in his eyes. No sensuality or seductiveness, just primal ruthlessness. Ugh. Delphi didn't know what to do. Talking and crying didn't convey the message about how bad he was feeling with Craig, and he just couldn't walk up to get away without risking hurting his bare foot on the sharp metallic debris scattered throughout the place. Craig caught a glimpse of Delphi looking at the ground and at his own feet, assessing the risk of getting away from the old rag cow. You have such cute little feet, did you know that? You scrawny little bitch. Craigie grabbed Delphi's foot and shoved it straight into his mouth, sucking it and biting, while using his other hand to cover Delphi's mouth to keep him from screaming. The biting on his feet hurt, and while Delphi usually liked the attention of his feet got from his partners, this time he was completely horrified by the pain. Delphi could feel his hold entering Craig's throat, and the wetness and heat of it would usually be arousing, but now was horrifying. Though not as horrifying as the shit and blood on his face and mouth. This was not Craig that Delphi knew from the online cyber sessions. Ugh. Delphi had always prided himself in being someone who was more sensitive than most people, who had almost a sort of sixth sense in regards to what people usually didn't pick up. He was feeling this intuition very strongly inside the house, like a dark presence or force that permeated the place and acted in different ways in whoever he came to contact with. On Craig, it was viciousness, cruelty, and impulse, but in himself was like an echo of pain and despair, a resonant feeling from what might have happened in that place several times over. Delphi began to consider that this wasn't really the Craig he knew, but instead was under some sort of spell or malicious influence, who preyed on his strongest traits, which usually weren't quite attractive, and distorted him into something evil and void of empathy and caring. The realization of what had happened before also began to take over him. Certainly, the steam from his intense sex in the stairwell of the convention center had already made its way online in the eyes of the police. This meant that not only Delphi and Craig would go viral, but the people from work would find out not only that he was gay, but also a furry. Not just his co-workers, his entire family and circle of friends. He would be fired for sure and lose a lot of his friends as well as support from his family. But none of that seemed as heavy as losing his previous compassion for Craig. While Duffy considered his feelings and the impact of the riot orgy on his professional life, Craig was looking around to try and find peculiar objects to inside into Duffy's many a little body holes, and perhaps even make a few new holes with some sharp metallic shards. Who the fuck is Craig for Craig? Oh, God. Craig had always wondered what it would feel like to fuck a gnashing wound, how the blood would serve as a lubricant and the raw flesh would give a differentiated feeling of pleasure to it. Not to mention how the screaming and the suffering on his partner, no, not partner, victim, the screaming and suffering on his victim's face would intensify the pleasure. Where would be a good place to stab someone without them dying? Well, at least not die too quickly, he wondered. The stomach, the muscle on the leg or the abs, the cheek. He considered where he would have to insert a shard on Delphi's throat in a way that it wouldn't kill him or hurt his jugular, but would still grant his penis easy access inside of his throat without having to go through the mouth. I wonder how long Delphi stay without breathing and if choking on his cock would feel much better when there's blood gushing off a hole in his throat, while his helpless little bit submissive coughed out blood throughout a place that wasn't his mouth. Ooh. A sudden moment of clarity, and Craig realized just for an instant just how deep and dark his train of thought had become. These violent and gruesome things weren't things that he usually thought about or even considered arousing. There was something strange, some sort of effect of fume from the drug, something exogenous from his body that made him turn a sharp turn to the dark side. The thought of anybody or anything else having control of Craig infuriated him. Only he could be the alpha, only he could dominate others. No spell or drug or haunted mansion should be able to have influence over the mighty alpha. No. No man, this shit ain't finishing right now. Nah. Known as Craig. Delphi recognized the glimpse of clarity in Craig's face and for a second and a beacon of hope ignited in his heart. Maybe Craig would break loose from his influence that had been overtaking him. Maybe it would all be okay soon and they could take comfort in each other's company while waiting for the police to stop the scene. All of a sudden, a loud noise was heard from upstairs, a thumping, rattling, breaking sound. Both Craig and Delphi turned their heads, but they could not believe what they were looking at. I'm not actually happy that it's not complete.